That and I had to wake up way too early to get here. Now just a quick show of hands. How many were not here last week? Quick show of hands. Okay, that's helpful. Because last week I did you missed the best message probably you ever heard last week. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just saying that to the guys who weren't here last week. I did a kind of a two-part message. And so you're going to get part 2 today, but I'm going to do a little bit of a review. And you'll notice your sheet has 2 sides on it. I put the notes on one side from last week, and then the notes from tonight are on the other side. And I'll point out which one's which if you don't know which one's which. But in this series about search and rescue, I've just focused really one message in 2 parts on the life of a rescuer. And how if you don't take care of yourself, if you don't allow the Lord to replenish your life, if you don't lead from a replenished life, you're going to be ineffective, or at least limited in your effectiveness in terms of how God might want to use you on search and rescue missions. And so if you would grab that sheet that said, let's see. The side that says replenishment truth number 1, it's all about Jesus. That's the review I'm going to do right now. And the statement I made last week, and I'm going to say the same statement again tonight, that in order to maximize your effectiveness on God's search and rescue team, you must lead from a replenished life. And I'm not going to go through the statistics again, but I shared with you just some statistics about kind of the, just even as it relates to pastors. Just the scary statistics about guys who fall out of ministry. And we all know pastors and non-pastors alike that they're, for whatever reason, they're just sidelined for a season. Or and one of the things we talked about is that we would be men that would be able to be used and maximize our effectiveness. Okay, that God wouldn't just use us for okay things, but man, that we would allow God to use us for unbelievable things. And so really the 4 replenishment tools that we talked about, replenishment truths, One, that it was all about Jesus, not you. And this is super important that when you're talking about living a replenished life, that you start with just even a daily surrender that goes, it's not about me. Okay, if you're like me, you're going to go to sleep tonight reminding yourself it's about Jesus, not you, and you'll wake up making it about you again. And you're going to surrender it all over again. Okay? And so number 1, it's all about Jesus and not you. Number 2, replenishment truth number 2, the Lord desires for us to live a replenished life. Okay, that's His plan for us. Not that we would live a half-empty life or we'd be able to be used a little bit, but that we would be on full replenishment all the time. Replenishment truth number 3, that a replenished life starts from abiding in Jesus Christ. That's where it's got to start, that we are abiding. Apart from Him, we can do nothing. And last, replenishment truth number 4, we cannot finish the race well if we disqualify ourselves, a result of being unreplenished. And one of the things we talked about was being able to finish the race. And being able to finish the race well, okay, and to be able to not have times during the race where we had to sit out. We were pulled into the medical tent. We had to take a time out, but that we would be able to run and finish the race well. So that last week was all about the why. And this week we're going to get into a little bit of the how. But I want you to be able, especially if you weren't here last week, I want you to be able to use that as a little bit of the support or the why of why it's important to live a replenished life. And so tonight we're going to again talk about the how. And I've brought a kind of a special tool that we're going to actually, you're going to get to make something today. And I know some of you got nervous because you saw colors. Some of you commented to me like you're a little nervous about there's work involved. But yeah, we're going to color a little bit tonight, and I'm going to show you something that's very simple, but it's very effective, and it can also be shared with others. So if you take your sheet, you can kind of follow along, and I've got all the verses there, and I think this week we've got them on the screen too. But I'm going to go through 4 replenishment tools of the how. How are you going to lead the replenishment life? We established last week what God's word has to say about why we should lead a replenished life. But tonight we're going to look at the how. And I'm sure there's way more than just 4 things, but I'm going to share 4 tonight. And the 4th one is going to be this tool that we're going to actually do together tonight. So, number 1, and again, this is the life of a rescuer. Number 1, replenishment tool number 1 is a plan. Got to have a plan. And as basic as that seems, the reality is we can just go through day in and day out without a plan. And then we wonder why things don't happen the way we wish they'd happen, or why we're not living a more replenished life. It doesn't usually just happen. We got to have a plan. Proverbs 16:3 says, "Commit your work to the Lord, and your plans will be established." Super important to recognize the order of that one sentence. It's not establish your plans and then ask the Lord to bless them. You commit your work to the Lord, and then your plans will be established. Proverbs 16:9. This is going to be our memory verse this week. Okay, and was I supposed to go through last week's memory verse? Yes. Is now a good time to do that? Yep. Anybody want to get up and do it? Yeah? Anybody got that? Somebody's got it? Yeah. Who's got it? Oh, stand up. Hey, man. Let's give him a hand right there. That's what I'm talking about. Absolutely. So Psalm 23, verses 1 through 3 was our memory verse for those of you that missed it. And that just talks about God's plan for us to live a replenished life. Well, this week, our memory verse comes from Proverbs 16:9. And I'm sure you guys all have maybe some favorite verses. I know for me, this is one of those maybe top 10 verses in my life. And this says in Proverbs 16:9, "The heart of a man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps." I want you guys to say that with me. That's our memory verse for this week. Let's go. The heart of a man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps. How often is that true, where we make plans, right? But it's the Lord that establishes our steps. It's really important that we have a plan, but we recognize that it's not about us. It's not about our plan. It's not our will be done. And the only way to know if we're doing the right plan is if we allow the Lord to establish our steps. Okay, and going back to last week, that starts with abiding in Him. How are you going to know the plan if you're not abiding with the giver of the plan? So, replenishment tool number 1, we got to have a plan. Replenishment tool number 2, I wrote evaluation, examination. Pick your word. Maybe they're the same thing, maybe they're not, they're close. To me, this is a really interesting piece, that I may have a plan, but do I actually take time to evaluate how I'm doing? Lamentations 3:40, "Let us test and examine our ways and return to the Lord." That says it really, really well. We must examine our ways and evaluate where have we gotten off course. And then it says, so that we can return to the Lord. Because how easy is it if we're not evaluating and examining our plan that we've drifted away from God's plan and we've drifted away from God's plan, and how long are you going to let that happen? You make a whole lot more work for yourself by not regularly examining yourself. You regularly examine yourself, you're not going to drift too far away, so returning back to the Lord isn't going to take as much work. Maybe it's not going to be quite as painful. But how many of us can point to a season in our life where we went quite a long time without evaluating, examining, or maybe just ignoring what we knew to be true, and we drifted pretty far off, and maybe we caused quite a bit of pain for ourselves and others. Psalm 139:23 says, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts." It's easier said than done, but you're asking, search me. God knows our heart. God knows our thoughts. We can't hide them from him. It's important that we evaluate and examine ourselves and that we ask God to search us and to show us where we're following his plan and where we've drifted. But if you don't take time to examine yourself, you don't take time to evaluate yourself, there's a really good chance that you will have drifted away from God's plan. Replenishment tool number 3, accountability. Here's the thing, you may have the best plan in the world, and you may even have a chance where you evaluate and examine yourself, but I don't know about you, but I'm my worst accountability partner. I'm so good at fooling myself and rationalizing, thinking things are better than they really are. We must have accountability in our plan. Proverbs 15:22 says, "Without counsel, plans fail, but with many advisors, they succeed." They succeed. Many advisors. Proverbs 27:17, and I know this is kind of a theme verse, or at least one of the theme verses of men's. Why men's exist? Because iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. Now, I have a feeling I may be talking to the choir, but this is what's really interesting to me. When I've got a plan, and when I'm regularly evaluating and examining my plan before the Lord, and I've got accountability in my life, I do a pretty good job of following God's plan. But number 3 has been really interesting in my life because it seems like as accountability goes, so I go oftentimes. Start to distance myself. Start to isolate myself. Or I choose accountability partners that are going to tell me what I want to hear. I know you've got accountability, and a lot of your accountability is right at your table, but I hope that you've chosen accountability partners. I hope that you've chosen advisors that are going to tell you the things you need to hear, not what you want to hear necessarily. And I hope that they're willing to share from the Word of God, not their thoughts, but God's thoughts. And they're willing to ask the hard questions. Not let you off easy and just say, man, how's life going? Good, great, let's move on. We must have accountability in our life if we're going to stay replenished. And so if we've got a plan, and we're regularly examining that plan, and we've got accountability to that plan, I think we're on a pretty good road to leading the replenished life. Now, I'm sure there's 100 different ways that we could have such a plan. Okay, I'm going to give you one tonight that I don't know. Hey, for me, when I was introduced to this tool a couple years ago, it's just been super easy and successful for me. I'm not saying it's going to be for you, but I'm going to ask you to at least give it a shot tonight. And there's a sheet at your table, and we're going to go back to this in a little bit, but it says replenishment cycle on it. And go ahead and put it up on the screen. There's one that kind of looks like it. Okay. Last week, for those that were here, I asked you, one of the questions was, what are some of the critical gauges in your life? Like if I were to ask you how you're doing, I could do it more specifically. Maybe 4 or 5 things that these things were going well in your life, that's a pretty good sign that you're leading a godly, replenished life. But if there were one or more of those things that aren't going so well, then something may be a little bit off. And it's time to create an action plan for how to pay attention to that. And so this tool we're going to do tonight, and at the center of the tool it says, what refuels me? Okay, and we're going to identify at least one, but hopefully 4 to 5 areas tonight or in the days to come. And for those of you who heard that last week, if you answered those questions, you might already have some that you're going to be able to work with. So, in just a moment, I'm going to give you the instructions for this. And I've done this one-on-one with people. I recently did it with a group of 80 realtors, which was, any realtors in here? Yeah, you guys are a piece of work. I'm just saying. I'm just kidding. Anyway, I've never done it with this many, so we're going to see what happens tonight. But before we do that, I'm going to give you some next steps. Okay? Again, this is the how. I'm going to give you some next steps for leading the replenished life. Let me see if I can find them here. All right, first one. I gave you about 5 last week. I'm going to give you 5 this week. First one is just keep coming back. Keep coming back to men's. Man, this is such a great thing. I felt so welcomed here, and I've enjoyed just kind of observing the love and just the excitement of when you guys come back together and being in the Word and singing. And this is just a really, really great thing. And this is part of the accountability. And I just want to encourage you to keep coming and bring a friend. I heard Joe say, the goal is 100 more guys. This is the thing. I don't know about you guys, but it is so easy to, forget that I was once invited as a first-time person. Man, I'm sure glad the person that invited me for the first time didn't get lazy before they invited me. Who's the person that you haven't invited or that you need to invite again? I'm thinking some of you guys didn't maybe respond to the first invitation you were invited. But keep going. Second thing is, I've got a memory verse. Proverbs 16:9. Anybody memorize it yet? Come on, it's an easy one. It's on the screen, for goodness sake. I'm just kidding. The heart of a man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps. Number 3, last week I shared with you an opportunity. There's just not a lot of things like this that come my way, and so I'm kind of excited about it. It's called the Global Leadership Summit, and it actually takes place in Chicago, but they live simulcast or broadcast it to churches and places all over the country, all over the world, I think. And it just so happens that a church in Modesto is hosting it. This is August 10th and 11th. You've got a little flyer at your table, but I showed you a 1-minute video last week telling you a little bit more about the conference, and I got a different one this week. So a little 1-minute video on this conference.
If we care about anything, if we care about our families, if we care about our churches, if we care about our businesses, if we care about our society, we better care about leadership. The signature of mediocrity is not an unwillingness to change, but the true signature of mediocrity is chronic inconsistency.
People say, failure is not an option. Oh, yes, it is, every time. The great leaders are those who understand that and are always ready to deal with that kind of failure.
Stop asking God to bless what you're doing. Find out what God is doing, because it's already blessed.
I want you to take the light that I've put on the inside of you, and I want you to go and penetrate that darkness and illuminate that darkness with the life and the hope of Jesus Christ.
That was a promo from a couple years ago. You see the quality of speakers that are there. And again, especially for those of you, this is a chance for you to bring a coworker, maybe somebody you're mentoring. I don't know how you are with conferences. I don't necessarily love conferences, but I love the chance to invest in a leader. And so for you to go to this and have discussions after that, and especially maybe for your non-Christian friends. Maybe it'd be hard to get them to go to church. Might be hard to get them to go to men's, but this might be an opportunity for you to be able to say, hey, we're going to go to a training together, a leadership training together. And we'll have a bunch of our pastors here at Big Valley Grace going, and I hope a bunch of you attend as well. But the information's at your table. I just want to highlight the fact that we do get a discounted rate. So make sure you write down that code if you want to, and I think it's on your sheet, but make sure you do that because you save a bunch of money by writing down that code there, and there's a website and all the information you need. Number 4, next steps. I offered you guys to email me if you wanted. I do a little bit of a leadership. I don't know if you call it just an email, a blog. I don't know what the right fancy words are, but I like to read and I like to write a little bit, and I like to send little things out. And you can email me at my private email. That's what I'll send it from. It's bobbykirchner@yahoo.com. Or if you just email at my church email, bobbyk@bbg.org, I'll get you started on that. I got some emails from you guys, and I sent one out today on leadership and the Sabbath. And so that gives you a little bit of an idea of, I'm always trying to connect leadership principles and what the Bible has to say about those things. So, or from other books I'm reading. Last but not least, we're going to answer the questions that are at your tables. And these questions, there's 2 of them. They relate specifically to that replenishment cycle that I'm going to walk you through in just a minute. So number 1, it's from last week, I believe. What would be the critical gauges in your life that would help you evaluate how replenished your life currently is, and how are you currently doing in those areas? And then number 2, who can hold you accountable as it relates to your replenishment cycle? So, with that being said, I'm going to give this a shot to walk you guys through this. And so if you grab your replenishment cycle, I'm going to tell you, you're going to need a regular pen or pencil, and then you will need the green, the yellow, and the red, but there's not enough for everybody at every table, so you're going to have to share with a buddy, which could get interesting. But this is what I want you to start by doing. I want you to think through the 4, you'll notice there's 4 different domains that are on there, right? There's a physical domain, there's an emotional domain, there's an intellectual domain, and there's a spiritual domain. If possible, you might want to pick one from each domain, but you don't have to. Okay? I don't want you to feel like, I got to get one from each one. But when you think about how you refuel or how you replenish, those 4 domains might be helpful in this. Okay? Now, I'm going to give you some examples from my replenishment cycle. And if one of these is like yours, you can go ahead and write it in. But one of the keys about what you write in, you need to be specific. So let me start with physical. Okay? You can't just write exercise. Way too general. Okay, is that something that God would want us to do? Absolutely. Do we need to be in good physical condition to be able to serve the Lord and be as effective as He wants us to be? Absolutely. But just putting exercise on there wouldn't be enough. You want to write down 3 days a week, 30 minutes. It's that specific. 3 days a week, 30 minutes of exercise. I'm going to put a little P there for the physical. Okay, what about the spiritual? You may say, look, for me, if I'm going to be honest, if I'm going to live a replenished life, I got to be in the Word of God and be praying every single day for 30 minutes a day. Maybe it's 60 minutes a day. Whatever it is for you. 7 days a week, 30 to 60 minutes a day. And you're going to write that in. I'll get to the colors in a little bit. Now, there may be some other areas. Okay, and by the way, these aren't things that necessarily you love doing. I started with exercise because one day I dreamed to be the guy who just loves to exercise. It's just not me. And if it was just about things that I thought I can't wait to do, I wouldn't have put that on there. But I have to be honest with myself to know, man, when I'm not eating right, when I'm not exercising, I'm tired more, I'm lethargic more, I can't do the things I want to do. And I truly believe that there are opportunities that God is calling me to do that I am just not physically able to do. That's not maximum effectiveness. Or think down the road. There are years of my life that God is wanting me to do something that, because I didn't live a replenished life, I may not make it as long as God intended for me to make it. That's not maximum effectiveness. So for me, I have to put exercise on there because I know that's part of me living a replenished life. I have to put my daily time in the Word. Every day, I have to put it on there because I know that's required for me to live a fully replenished life. What are some other areas? Well, for me, I must have a weekly date time with my wife in order to have a replenished life. That's critical for us. Now, I've got 4 kids, so man, does it always get to be a 4-hour dinner at a restaurant? Nope. It's sometimes we just sit in the backyard together. It's sometimes we go for a walk. It's sometimes we get a cup of coffee. But it's weekly, and it's an hour for us. Do I want to spend more than that? Yes, but it's weekly, and it's an hour. So I put that down in the box. Weekly date time. We call it marriage conference. Weekly marriage conference. 1 hour. And I'll give you one more. And this was a really interesting one for me. I don't know, you guys are in a men's group, so maybe you don't deal with this as much as I used to, but somewhere in my life, I stopped having guy time. I think it was when I had kids, because this is the thing, I had time to work and be a husband and be a dad. That's what I had time for. And man, especially when you got young kids at home, hey honey, I'm gonna go out with the guys. I'd feel major guilt about that. And this is what's interesting. That guilt didn't come from my wife. It just came from me. And little by little I went, man, where did my buddies go? There's something really cool just about just hanging out with dudes and just talking about guy stuff. I need that in my life. And literally my replenishment cycle, I had to put on there monthly guy time, 4 hours, where it's just, I'm calling up a buddy or 6, and we're just going to hang out. Just straight guy time, that's it. And we usually don't have a plan because we're guys, and we just don't usually have a plan. But what's interesting is you may go, once a month, man, that's not very much. Well, it is when you're starting from like 0. Do I get more than that? Sometimes, but I must do it at least once. And man, I really look forward to it. I have really looked forward to more guy relationships, just doing life with guys. It's part of what replenishes me. And so what I want you to do, and I'm going to talk about the colors in a minute, but I want you to take a moment and fill in at least one of the boxes. If you already know all 4 or all 5, that's fine, but just start with one at least. I'm going to give you a couple minutes. If you can get more than one in, great. But go ahead and take a moment to fill at least one in. Okay, I'll give you about a minute or two, and I'll bring you back together, and I'll tell you what to do with these colors. And if you have questions, just raise your hand and I can answer them. So, yeah. Whatever one you put in. So I like exercise 3 times a week, 30 minutes. Just put P for physical in that box. Yeah. Then you go to the next one and say, now I'm doing spiritual. Okay. Now you may have, 4 physical and 1 spiritual. You don't have to hit them all. But if you, whatever one you pick, just try to identify, is that a physical? Is that an emotional? Is that an intellectual? Is that a spiritual? What else? Other questions? Yeah.
Bobby, I think the problem is you've got 5 boxes and only 4 categories.
Yeah, so first of all, we're aiming for 4 to 5, okay? But you're not necessarily going to hit one from every category. Those are just there as kind of guidelines. So if you say, I've got 3 physical, 1 spiritual, 1 emotional, great. There's no rule that says you have to have an intellectual. There's no rule that says you have to have a physical. There's no rule that says you have to have any of them necessarily. And by the way, some of you may be going, well, I got like 9 or 10. I'm going to tell you what will happen if you have 9 or 10. You will always be living unreplenished. It will be impossible for you to leave, and I'll get to the green, red, and yellow in a minute, but the goal is to be green. It will be impossible for you to be green in 10 areas at the same time. So that's why this is narrow it down to the top 4 or 5. And I will tell you right now, just because I've done this for 2 years, what you pick today will probably change if you stick with this. It'll change over time just because, but it'll change because if you really spend time with the Lord on this, trying to develop your replenishment cycle, I believe the Lord will lead you to different things. And you may think it was one thing, and then you go, no, it wasn't really that. It's this. Okay? The one I currently have right now, it's been the same one for about 9 months, and I don't see it change anytime soon. Okay. So, that's what I want you to do. Take one of the boxes, and then I'm out of time because you're going to have time to kind of discuss it a little bit. But take at least one of the boxes, and this is where the pens come in. I want you to evaluate currently, right now, are you green, which means you're replenished in this area. You're doing great. Are you yellow? It's okay. It's not great, but it's not horrible. Or are you red, which means you're sucking wind in this area right now, okay? Eventually you can do this for all 5, but we're just going to start with 1 or whatever. So again, red, sucking wind. Yellow, green, you're nailing it. It's a replenished area. You're doing really, really well. Just do a circle, yeah, a green circle or above it, that kind of thing. And you can start to see how this immediately becomes a gauge or a dashboard about how you're doing right now. So when I talked last week about something, instead of guys going, hey, how you doing? The guys that are my accountability partners, they pick one of these 5 areas and they ask me specifically, hey, in this area, are you green, yellow, or red? And if you've done this honestly, you and somebody who you want to hold you accountable can immediately go, you're leading a replenished life. Or, hey, you're doing okay. Or, wow, lots of reds and yellows. We better come up with a plan. We better pray. It's not going to change all on its own. Okay, so when we talk about making a plan, this is part of your plan. When we talk about examining that plan, that can be something you do every single day, every week, every month, how as often as you want to do it. Because something that's green today may be yellow next week. Something that's red today may be green in a month. And the third part, the accountability. You can give this to someone else. And I don't have time to go through it all tonight, but just imagine you could do this with your spouse. You could do this with your kids. You could do this with your coworkers. This is a very simple tool to evaluate how you're really doing. And again, if you're in a yellow or a red area, make a plan. It won't get better on its own. Okay. Any other questions? And then I'm gonna let you guys kind of discuss this, and I'll walk around. But any questions about this? Okay. So you've got time at your tables. I'll walk around if there's any questions. But you've got time. Go ahead and kind of discuss maybe something you wrote down, maybe an area that you're not doing green in, or maybe you just discuss those questions and talk about how do we help each other to